See, all of a sudden, I was about 105 pounds when I met the Lord. I was a 4-year meth addict. That my mom had passed away, and I didn't know where else to turn except I've been doing drugs since I was 6 years old. Started smoking cigarettes when I was 6 years old. By the time I was 10, I was smoking 2 packs a day. By the time I was 12, I was not only doing marijuana on a regular basis, smoking marijuana on a regular basis, but I was selling it. By the time I was 16, I was going to New York City because I lived in Connecticut. I could hop on a train and hit Grand Central Station and come out and go to Central Park and buy LSD, acid, and sell that. But I was taking so much acid because I was making so much money off of it. I wasn't a clean person when I met the Lord. When I met the Lord, my drug addiction had gotten so bad that I moved out of my house where my wife and my son were, and our house was already in foreclosure because I had snorted the whole house away and snorted my business away, and my vehicle had already been repossessed. It wasn't good. I abandoned my family, and I was living at a dead guy's house. A Vietnam vet had passed away, and his estate hadn't been closed yet. He didn't have anybody to leave it with, so John was over the estate and had offered me a place to stay in there, and there was nothing really in the house. So I got some couch cushions and had manufactured me a bed in the corner of this dead man's house, and that was my life. I was a 105-pound meth addict that had run from my family, was so depressed and lonely, and my anxiety was so... I experienced depression in ways that I hope nobody even touches on what that meant. And so after like 9 months I had been out of the house, I decided one night if I had a gun I would have took my life, no questions asked. I was so afraid that I was going to fail at even trying to kill myself because I was such a failure in life. I had no hope. I was an atheist. Where's hope without God? When you remove God from it, we're all just a bunch of particles flying around, floating through space. I was told by my public school teachers that Darwin had it all figured out, that we're just a great big cosmic accident with no true, real meaning in life, that you could develop meaning, but it was only meaning to you, not meaning to anybody else. That was it. I was molested from the time that I was 2 years old till I was 10. I don't even remember how long that lasted. My uncle molested me. I didn't have the life that you would look at and go, well, that's peaches and cream. My life was a disaster. I had my mom. She was the greatest thing ever. And that's why when she died, I got hooked on meth bad, and to the point where I just couldn't function anymore. And so after about 9 months, I had gone back to where my wife and my son were, back at our house that hadn't foreclosed yet. And praise God, my son was already asleep, and my wife was courteous enough to let me in the door that night. And I just sat on the couch and I just cried out and I said, I didn't think anybody was listening. As an atheist, I didn't think anybody was listening. I had given up hope on the fact that anybody could listen, or wanted to listen, or cared enough to listen. But I sat there that night and I screamed at God. I didn't know who else to yell at, so I yelled at the idea that there was a God. And my argument was, if you're God, what kind of a God would you be to create me and then leave me to this? So I wasn't taking ownership of how I got to this place, and a lot of cards were dealt to me that I didn't start doing drugs on purpose. My next door neighbors thought it would be funny to get a 6-year-old doing cocaine, and that's, you know. So it's not like all of them were my fault, but most of them were. But I finally said this. I said, look, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. And I remember just looking straight up through my ceiling, and I said, if you're God, do something about it. Careful, because he heard it. He was like, oh, I've been waiting 30 years for that. My gosh, was that so hard? And it was hard. It was, we're stubborn in our human ways, man. And we don't want to. There's a lot of you in this room who have yet to really give God your life. You're saved. You go to church. You do the churchy things, but you haven't really allowed Him Lord over every area of your life. And so when you come to God and you're 105 pounds and you're broken and hopeless, it's very easy to give over 100% of your life to, because if not for Him, I'm done. I want to kill myself. I'm very, very suicidal. Well, He heard that prayer, And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I recall it like this. My wife put me to bed that night, and it all happened so fast, I basically woke up the person I am today. I mean, I don't remember what it's like to even be high, or what it feels like. It's called drip. After you do meth or coke or anything, you have a constant drip and the loop for the drip, you know. I don't remember what that is. I don't remember anything. He took my guitar away because I was trying to become a big rock and roll star, and I was gonna, you know, rule the world and do as many drugs as I could and sleep with everything I could and rule the world, you know. I mean, so I had completely wrong intentions with that, and he took it. I now have my wife who's sitting back there, totally restored. My son is he's going to be 21 next Sunday. He's already engaged to an awesome woman of God. He's an awesome man of God. He plays drums on our worship team. Anybody heard of Lauren Daigle? Mm-hmm. And when you hear my future daughter-in-law sing, I'm not even making this up. I don't know how she does it, but she's like, that voice that comes out of her is exactly like Lauren Daigle. It's the most beautiful thing. My family's been restored to the fullest. I don't remember what it is. He gave me my guitar back, and I joke with Scott a lot, because Scott he plays electric guitar for our worship team at church, and he's just incredible. I was like, man, I used to be able to do stuff like that. But we'll do it again. And I was like, I can't. God never gave that back. God gave me acoustic guitar and playing rhythm, and I love it. It's not anything I did when I played guitar, but he was like, I'll tell you what, make you a deal. I'll give it back, but you're going to glorify me with it. And I was like, okay. And so I've been leading worship for almost 8-9 years now, and God's given me a life. So when Barry got to this point of the blood, I couldn't share any of that with him. You know what I mean? I couldn't share. I was on the phone with a guy who wasn't going to understand that, because see, what he told me that day, I've heard a lot of sermons on "it is finished," tetelestai, that word that keeps coming back up over and over and over and over again. Tetelestai. It is finished. What did you say? It's in the perfect tense?
Perfect tense.
It's in the perfect tense, meaning, Joe said, if I told you I built a house and it's finished, and I want you to see my house, and we drive over, and all of a sudden while we were driving over, it burned to the ground. The house isn't there. The house was finished, but it's no longer here. It's burnt to the ground. He said, when Jesus said it is finished, nothing could stop it, because it was in its perfect tense in the way that you understand it. When he said it is finished, he said it's finished and nothing can stop it from this point. It's finished for all eternity. It's finished before I got here, and it's finished while I'm here, and it's finished after I get here, and nothing can stop that truth. And so I have heard a lot of sermons. I think my favorite one is the prisoner, because I felt like a prisoner, y'all. I felt like a prisoner. I was a prisoner to myself, and my favorite one is, you know, when the prisoner would go in the jail, they would write down their offenses, and after a certain period of time, they would cross off one offense. And then after a period of time, or paying off the penalty, they would cross off another offense. And when the final offense was written, was crossed off, they would say, it is finished, and the prisoner was released. That's my favorite one I've ever heard until this point. Because all of a sudden I understood, for the first time in my human life, my adult life, and my life on this planet, I understood exactly what Christ did. Because see, you can't bleed Billy Rubin unless you've gone all the way. We watch Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ and we say, oh, what a terrible thing. I think that was child's play compared to what he went through. I think the Romans most of the time didn't even want to get him to the cross. It was too much effort. They would beat their victims to a pulp until they bled to death, sitting tied to that horse, the stake. When he said that day, that man, that blood is red because it's not technically blood anymore, it's Billy Rubin. And I thought, when Christ said to his Father, tetelestai, it is finished, he was going Old Testament, where the blood had to be completely drained out of the sacrifice in order for the sacrifice to be acceptable to God. And it just, all it transformed my understanding of grace. So whether or not that's his shroud or not, it doesn't change the fact that, man, the man that loved me enough that he didn't say, tell you what, you get off your addiction, you clean some things up, come back and we'll talk. Right where I was, he stopped time for me, and he picked me up off of that floor, and he dusted me off, and he said, son, I love you. I love you enough that I went all the way on that cross for you.
Amen.
I didn't stop 90% of the way. I didn't stop 95% of the way. 99% of the way was not an option for me. I love you so much that I've given 100% of my blood so that you can be reconciled to the Father. And it wrecked my world. And for the past, that was 7 years ago. I was running fast already I've only been saved for going on 13 years. It hasn't been a long time. God just had a downloading plan. Once I figured out what the truth was, he said, now I need you to go and tell people what the truth really is. And so I 7 years ago started chasing it. It was about 7 years ago that I was in the process of building the museum, which is where I met Joe. When I have a 1,800 square foot traveling museum that's got over 300 ancient artifacts and over 60 ancient Bible leaves and cuneiform and 12-foot long Torah scrolls that survived the Holocaust out of Germany. And I just have all these things that I go around and I travel and I tell people what the truth is. And the truth is that God loves you more than you'll ever know. The truth, you sitting in here, you got a special place in my heart because I wish I was where you are when you're sitting in here hearing this. It could have really transformed my life to the point where I did not have, it was never God's will that I got to that point in my life. That's not good. God's will is perfect. What I went through is not perfect. Doesn't mean he can't use it. He is, but that was not his will. And youth, students sitting in here, listen to me, man. I still teach youth. I love you. I still teach youth. We have a youth camp. I spend a lot of time at Christian schools teaching youth, and I try and tell you, don't get wrapped up in the nonsense that the world's trying to throw at you. Stop, take a breath, and give yourself the same respect that you know that you deserve. You know what the Bible does? It assumes you love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's presuming you love yourself, or else you couldn't love your neighbor as you love yourself unless you love yourself. Love yourself enough to seek the truth about what your future is. And if I could take you in a time machine and travel you 20 years in the future and show you what God's plan for you is, you would take it all day long. You'd go back and say, man, whatever I wanted, I want to lay it down. I don't want nothing to do with that because God's plan. Can I tell you? Can I brag on God and then I'm done?
Yes.
Let me brag because I'm not bragging on myself. Left to my own defenses, I'm 105 pounds, nearly dead, with a business that's shut down, abandoned my family. My house is in foreclosure. My car's already gone. That was what I brought to the table. I didn't change anything. I didn't go through any courses or anything to figure out how to change your life. I didn't take some 12-step program. I simply said, God, let's try this your way. And in a mere 13 years, I've been on TV shows and I hosted my own radio show. I've been on nationally syndicated radio shows as a guest. I've gone through the Grand Canyon, 197 river miles as a Christian leader through Answers in Genesis, where I got to tour the entire Grand Canyon with 2 leading experts in the world on geology. I've got to land a plane. I didn't land it technically, but I was sitting there right at where birth, at Kitty Hawk, where flight was birthed. And if you know me, flying's always been one of the most important things in my life. I always wanted to be a pilot. My dad said, you're never going to amount to nothing. So I started smoking reefer and took his advice, and that really worked out well. But God, not my earthly father, my heavenly Father said, I see your heart and I want to reward you. Called me to a youth conference up in Nag's Head, and we got to fly and land a private plane with some friends of ours right there where flight was birthed, and it meant the world to me. I've been able to travel to universities and Christian schools and churches and conferences and build a museum, and I've authored a book called The Faith Survival Guide. All this to say this. Do you think I did any of that? Left to my defenses, I'm stuck on a floor as a meth addict and I can't get up. But God has a much bigger plan. But my question is this, and I'm going to bring Joe up. You can bring Joe up to close us out for the night. But God, and we have questions too, but God can only be worked out if He is the owner and the proprietor of your life. And if you still hold on to